little shorter than Erica. Again, my name is Rebecca Husseini, and so happy to be with you all this morning. Today is an important step towards becoming an engaged and effective citizen, and how it all starts with our knowledge and skills as individuals and organizing as communities. Community organizing is the driving force behind meaningful change, and it's about organizing for the greater good, protecting our values and safety for all, and the work we have to do as Muslims in America to establish our presence, build influence, and contribute to society. This workshop right now is really more important than ever, because as we see with what's happening against our community and against other communities, it's so important for us to have a unified voice and to really, speak out against many of these injustices so that we can affect change. Over the next couple of hours, you'll learn how community organizing and civic engagement fits within our Islamic framework, how the various levels of government, from federal to local, are structured, how they function, and how to engage on various issues. How to get people to care about the issues you care about and the way you care about them. How to develop working relationships and partnerships with people and groups of diverse backgrounds and interests. We'll also take a look at how to analyze an important issue. Today we'll be looking at hate crimes, which is a very relevant issue facing our community right now. In addition to developing yourself in these areas, you'll also get an opportunity to translate your skills into action along with your peers. This will be dependent on time because I just want to make sure we have enough time and enough people to break into groups. So I may, at the end, adjust it a little bit, but we'll still get a chance to put this into action. What we'll do is we'll put you in a real world experience and give you a chance to work with others to craft goals, talking points, and implement a plan. In front of you is a workbook that has the information that I will be presenting to today. It dives a little deeper into some of these concepts. I encourage you to follow along, and sometimes I'll skip around. You can take notes on some of what we'll discuss today. Please ask, for the interest of time, if you have questions, please jot them down, and I'll pause at the end of each section in case anyone has any questions. You can take these workbooks home with you to study further and then use it as a resource as you take this into the real world. At the end of today, everyone can sign at the end of today's workshop. We'll be giving you a certificate of completion for this workshop. I'll have to email it to you because I was not aware of everyone who would be attending. So if you could sign in at the front, Anaima can guide you. This certificate will serve as a reminder of the skills and the knowledge that you've gained and empower you to take action in your community. Okay. So first we're going to get into the Islamic perspective on effective civic participation. The Quran says, "O mankind, we have created you all out of a male and a female, and have made you into nations and tribes so that you may come to know one another." We quote it all the time, especially in interfaith settings, but what does it mean? One method of knowing each other and practicing our Islamic values comes in the form of engaging with people of different backgrounds and working with them on issues of common concern. Instead of having someone else speak on our behalf, we must advocate for ourselves. The engagement then allows us to convey the message of Islam, our work for justice and equality, win respect from others, and be recognized as crucial partners in addressing local and national challenges. We have a lot to be proud of as a community. In the past few decades, we've established more than 1,200 mosques around the country, which serve extremely diverse communities. We're represented across diverse industries, from doctors to engineers, policymakers, and artists, all striving to reshape the narrative of Islam and Muslims. And in the last public report, which they prepared, CARE tallied 235 Muslim elected officials. This was in 2023, which is likely to be now over 250. And there are now hundreds of American Muslims working on Capitol Hill and in the offices of elected officials around the country. These accomplishments are part of a legacy of Muslim innovation in fields like astronomy, mathematics, and architecture, advancing global knowledge. Civic engagement allows Muslims to advocate for ourselves. When we actively participate, we develop mutual understanding and contribute to the betterment of society. By engaging with others, we can practice our Islamic values and share it with others. This is guided by the Quran and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him. This earns respect and shows that we're key contributors to society and partners in finding solutions to important issues. The Quran emphasizes engagement with a threefold purpose: upholding justice, serving the public interest, and fostering understanding. Muslims are called to uphold and defend justice for the benefit of all people. The Quran warns against self-interest and animosity. O you who have attained to faith, be ever steadfast in your devotion to God, bearing witness to the truth in all equity, and never letting hatred of anyone lead you into the sin of deviating from justice. We're called to interact with others for mutual benefit for broader society. Serving the public interest requires collaboration with society as a whole. God encourages engagement with even wrongdoers or foes. This interaction can foster understanding and potentially lead to transformation. And it's most critical in times such as we're facing right now that we understand this. Again, from the Quran, but since good and evil cannot be equal, repel thou evil with something that is better. And lo, he between whom and thyself was enmity may then become as though he had always been close unto thee, a true friend. Engaging with those who may disagree with us is part of our responsibility. Changing hearts and minds through actions and building relationships can lead to positive change. What enduring legacy did Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, leave behind? He was a leader in civic and community partnerships. He was known for his ability to build alliances and foster cooperation. He was a master at negotiation and diplomacy. He worked across political and religious divides for the greater good, and he left behind a model for engagement and collaboration. This demonstrated the power that he held of forming partnerships and creating positive change. If we disengage, it leads to lost influence. Stepping back means we have less say in decisions that impact us. As we're seeing today, these decisions shape our future and our children's future. Our involvement is crucial in shaping policies that affect us. We need to be at the table when decisions are being made, or someone else will speak for us. That's why understanding a lot of these core principles is important. That way we can be heard and respected. God does not change the condition of a people unless they change that which is within themselves, from the Quran. The path forward is clearly outlined here. Change does not come from just wishing for it. We need action. Now let's dive into how the U.S. government works, and many of this might be familiar to many of you. It's just the basic structure. It's important to understand this structure for effective community organizing. Knowing who holds power helps in targeting our advocacy efforts effectively and allows for strategic engagement with policies and laws. If we're well informed, we can demand transparency and responsiveness from our elected officials and public institutions. So I'll pause in case anyone has any questions at this point on what we've covered so far. If not, I'll move on. All right. Power in the federal government is best described as dispersed, divided, and decentralized. It's also limited, directly and indirectly, by our Constitution. There's a separation of powers which prevents any one entity from having total control. Sometimes I know it's difficult to reconcile that with what we're seeing, but this is the way it's structured. Our two-party system, which shapes political discourse and dominates our elections. There's three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches, and they check and balance each other. And power is distributed across federal, state, and local levels. That's also why it's important to understand how each is structured at the federal, state, and local level. The U.S. Congress is the legislative branch of the federal government. It's comprised of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The President presides over the executive branch of the federal government. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the federal court system. How do these checks and balances work? It prevents any one branch from becoming too powerful. The executive branch can veto legislation. They can appoint judges and enforce the laws through their agencies. The legislative branch can override vetoes, approve appointments, and impeach officials. And the judicial branch can rule laws or executive actions as unconstitutional. Each branch relies on and limits the others to maintain balance. So let's look at the judicial branch to start. It's the highest court in the state, hears appeals from lower courts. the final authority, it has the final authority on interpreting state laws and constitutions. And laws are often written with broad language to gain broad political support. The courts then clarify the interpretation and how the laws are applied. And they can determine whether the laws align with the state and the U.S. Constitution, or they can strike down unconstitutional laws or policies. And these court decisions then set legal precedents that shape future legislation. So what we're seeing today is the precedent was set in years before. So that's how it's also determined that way. They can influence how laws affect communities in real-world scenarios. Now the legislative branch, which is our Congress. They pass laws that establish public policy. They're divided into two chambers. One is the House of Representatives and one is the Senate. Each member in the House of Representatives is elected every 2 years, and they each have a member that represents a congressional district. So there's several districts, for example, in Los Angeles. In the Senate, there are 2 senators per state, and senators are elected every 6 years. Most of the work that they do, it happens in committees and subcommittees where they examine issues. They review bills before they reach the full chamber for a vote. If a committee approves of a bill, it moves to the House and Senate floors for a vote. And a bill typically requires a majority vote to pass. If the House and Senate pass different versions of a bill, they must reconcile the differences. And then once both chambers agree on a final version, and then it is voted on before becoming a law. Also, each congressional office, each district that I mentioned as the representatives each have a district, they have both an office on Capitol Hill and an office in the district. And the Capitol Hill office handles policy analysis and legislative matters. The district office focuses on constituent concerns and other local issues. So there's methods of engagement in each, and I'll get into some of those a little bit later. The executive branch. In the executive branch, the president is the one who holds signing and veto power of this legislation. He or she signs bills into laws, or he or she vetoes them. Congress can then override a veto with a 2/3 majority in both chambers. The president has limited legislative power beyond the veto. In practice, the president can persuade Congress and the public to support their policy goals. Executive orders, which we're seeing many of those lately, they're directives issued by the president, and each president has announced executive orders in their administration. And everyone here is becoming familiar with executive orders. They're used to manage operations of the federal government. They carry the force of the law, but they do not require congressional approval. The key thing with executive orders is they must be based on existing laws or constitutional powers. The president can't create new laws or override legislation passed by Congress. And these orders can be challenged in court, which is also what we're seeing. And they can also be overturned if they're deemed unconstitutional. I'm going to show you here an example of the legislative process here. First, there's a legislative proposal. In this example, it's the civil rights mandates that Congress passed key civil rights laws between 1963 and 1968 as part of the Great Society Initiative. And each law went through a committee review, debate, and then went to vote. And these laws led to the creation or strengthening of agencies like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, HUD, Civil Rights Division. I'm also going to give you an example of executive branch, how you can advocate, or communities can advocate there. In this example, I chose our MPAC participation in DOJ interagency meetings. Typically this isn't really something where community would be asked to participate in. These are usually like organizations that are well known for advocacy. So in this example, we participate in a quarterly interagency meeting that's organized by the Department of Justice. We bring together representatives from the Arab, Muslim, Sikh, and South Asian organizations, and we're able to voice concerns of the community on your behalf and get updates on key issues that we're facing. This is important for bridging the gap between the communities and the government agencies. So that's one method of engagement with the executive branch. These regular meetings help build relationships and allow for real-time policy updates, and it's also rare access to key government officials. In these meetings, we're able to ensure your voices are heard in these policy discussions. All right, how do we build relationships with congressional offices? This could be an organization like MPAC, or it could be a community member like you. It's an effective way to convey a message about a specific issue of legislative matter, of a legislative matter. Any one of us can do it. I think I might have skipped a slide. Okay. Another way to advocate within Congress is by testifying before various committees. In this example, this is also another example where usually it's not a community member that's asked. Sometimes it can be if they hold a particular expertise, but they're really, the person that they usually invite has a noted expertise in a particular subject matter. In this example, in 2007, MPAC president, who many of you know, Salam al-Mariyati, testified before the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security. And this was done through a combination of building those strong relationships over time. And also he had a noted expertise in the subject matter, so that's why he was invited to testify. It was important testimony that was given, and this is one example of a couple of times that we've given testimony on the Hill. It gave a voice to our community, American Muslims, during important national security discussions. And it also helps bridge understanding and highlight our contributions to the safety and security of the United States. All right, so let's get into state government. They tend to have the greatest influence over our daily lives. Each state has its own written constitution, government, code of laws, and sometimes there's great differences in law and procedure between individual states. The highest elected official of each state is the governor. Local governments are generally structured in accordance with the laws of various individual states, so they vary state to state. There's usually two tiers, counties and municipalities, and some states have their counties divided into townships. Local governments are generally structured in accordance with the laws of the individual states. And there's various positions within those, such as city council, a city councilor or mayor, local judges, sheriff, and the government structure can vary from city to city. And the structures, for example, a common structure would be a governing council with the mayor and president, and then a city manager, and they have various departments like public agencies. And I know that was a lot, and so I'll pause here in case anyone has any questions on how the government is structured in local government. No? Okay. All right, now how do we build power as a community? I know it sometimes feels daunting. When you think about it, enacting change, creating policies, and securing rights, it's a multi-layered process. And it happens through the influence of those in positions of government and power. So we have to raise our voice, so we have to engage. What drives this process forward is that engagement and that participation. And as we went through before, each of us can play a crucial role in making change happen, and it's really guided through our Islamic principles. Many of you know Keith Ellison. He's the Minnesota Attorney General and former member of Congress. He said, if you're not at the table, then you will be on the menu. If you're not actively involved in the decision-making process, others will make those decisions for you. And we've seen that time and time again. It's important to be present and engaged in conversations to ensure your interests are represented and not overlooked. Otherwise, someone else will do that for you. And then you're subjected to those decisions. As citizens, our support of the interests, values, and goals we share is crucial. It's our responsibility to stay engaged and ensure our voices are heard. Only through this sustained advocacy can we ensure that our goals are championed effectively. I'm going to look at another case study, an example of a successful social advocacy for an important issue. It happened during the civil rights movements in the 1950s and 60s. It brought minority rights to the national conscience and forced the country to address the rights to freedom, respect, dignity, and social and economic equality. And we saw a lot of change happen through that process. So here are some of the examples of the pillars of power. We need to build a broad, organized, and engaged membership, which is rooted in our community and that speaks to our concerns. We need to equip our community, such as in workshops like this and other conversations that we can have, to lead and sustain change efforts. That way it's not just a one-off, it can be sustained. We need to build alliances because we can't do it alone. And we need to increase our collective influence and impact by working with others who may not necessarily be from the same community, but also face many of the same issues. We need to define the problems and solutions from the community's perspective and shift dominant narratives. This is something that is front of mind for all of us right now. And then we need to design targeted actions. So it's all strategy, so that we need to be strategic when we mobilize ourselves and build out that engagement. We need to pursue concrete wins that alter systems and structures in favor of equity and justice. And we need to ensure sustainability and have a well-resourced effort and also be adaptable over time. When the current situation no longer works, as it does now, it's essential to drive a movement that sparks change for the betterment of the community. Some of you may have known Dr. Meher Toot, MPAC co-founder, may God rest his soul. He emphasized the importance of the stepladder for affecting change. And this stepladder has 4 steps: presence, respect, acceptance, and influence. You can't have respect until you build a presence. And you can't have acceptance until you build respect. Then once respect is achieved, you can achieve actual influence. So there's different steps in building that. You can't just start from scratch. It's like a balloon. It has an effect that way. So how do we build influence? We need to make sure that people know who we are, where we stand, and what we represent. We earn respect from both supporters and opponents by respecting ourselves and others and performing respectfully. This way we're seen as a legitimate part of American pluralism, not outsiders and not dissenters. This way we can contribute to our policy making through democratic processes which are guided by our values. I spoke earlier of needing to work together with other allied communities that are facing the same issues. And this is how this collective effort can be leveraged to form strong partnerships and build greater influence. By building these coalitions, we can align our messages and be effective, and then it strengthens the overall impact. So what is a coalition? A coalition is a group of individuals and organizations which come together to tackle a common issue to achieve a specific goal. While it can be very rewarding, it also is very exhausting work, I will say. Here are the components of effective coalition building. We need to understand the goals and the desired outcomes. We need to select individuals and organizations who are committed to the cause and set clear, achievable, and actionable steps. First, you bring the group together to start working towards those goals. You establish roles, responsibilities, and a decision-making process. And a little bit later in our tabletop exercise, we'll be able to put some of this into practice and think through some of these. This keeps the members of the coalition focused and engaged. And we also need to identify with coalition building what we need in terms of time to get the work done, the funding that is needed, and the materials. And then as you move through the coalition building and the actual work, you continuously assess and adjust the strategy to improve your outcome. I'll give you an example of successful coalition building. In 2007, different faith and community leaders came together to support Dr. Hatoot's nomination for the Los Angeles Human Relations Commission John Allen Buggs Award. Some individuals had opposed the nomination and they moved to stop the award from being given. So we gathered together an interfaith coalition, which brought together various groups with different backgrounds to unify around this shared goal, which is to have Dr. Hatoot awarded this award. We coordinated our efforts with the coalition to make sure that we were all on the same page and had a unified voice, we brought together youth, which is particularly important, through personal letters, which highlighted the human impact of Dr. Hatout's work. It also demonstrated grassroots engagement. So when elected officials see constituency behind the leaders, that's very effective because they also know that translates into votes. The coalition then maintained momentum through continuous action around this, and then eventually they were successful and we were able to secure the award for Dr. Hatout. So that's one example of successful coalition building and how to get that done. Now I'd like to welcome our esteemed guest who has extensive experience in the next section in our workshop, which is communication and framing. Marian Ahmed is a senior account supervisor on Edelman's Public and Government Affairs team based in Los Angeles. She previously worked on the corporate reputation team with a focus on energy and sustainability. Before joining Edelman, Marian was the deputy communications director for Adam Schiff's Senate campaign. She previously worked as Schiff's press secretary in his congressional office and on his Senate campaign. In the 2022 election cycle, Mariam managed communications for a Maryland gubernatorial candidate and a New York congressional candidate, and helped Democrats maintain their majority in the Senate as National Press Secretary for Senate Majority PAC. Earlier in her career, Mariam worked for the presidential campaign of Pete Buttigieg, for the advocacy organization Climate Power on the Hill, and for DC-based firms Precision and Wildfire Contact. I could go on, but I hope that you will really take heart in her presentation on how we communicate our message, because she certainly has expertise in this area.
Assalamu alaikum. How's everyone doing today? Thank you so much for coming out on a Sunday to be here with all of us. I'm curious, before we dive into communications, how many people here have been to City Council? Who's been down to the City Council building? Okay, we have a few. So anyone here can go to a City Council meeting. You can sign up to give public comment on issues that you care about. And so all of us here, we have a voice, we have a role. We might not all be able to go to DC, right? We might not all be able to go to Congress and have meetings there, but we can do that in our local community where there are issues affecting us every single day, right? Whether that's economic issues, housing, whether it has to do with your water or your street, the potholes in your neighborhood. You have a voice, and we need to show up as a community more and more, especially right now, and make our voices heard. So I urge you to look up who your council member is, build those relationships, show up when you can, inshallah. So diving into communications here really quickly. We more than ever need to understand how to talk about our values as a community and how to shape our narrative. Why does this matter, right? So our community's voice and perspective does matter. We know this. We need to make sure that we are communicating clearly and confidently. Right now, misunderstandings, misinformation, misrepresentation is what is shaping public perception of our community. And it's shaping policy. So a lack of information, a lack of representation is going to harm us in the long run. We have a right, we have a responsibility to tell our own stories and advocate for our community's interests. And we can do so through the processes that Rebecca just mentioned, and also by engaging with the media, right? So I know we talked a lot about government right now, but another huge key avenue that we can use, a tool that we can use, is by engaging with the media. And I'll dive more into that in a little bit, but I want to talk about what the keys are for effective communication, whether you're talking with policymakers, whether you're talking with members of the media, whether you're talking with your neighbor, whether you're talking with somebody in our community, right? These are just the keys that we want to be thinking about. So first of all, know your audience. Who are you talking to? Who is your audience? Is it a policymaker? You're going to approach that differently. Is it a journalist? You're going to approach that differently. Is it a youth in the Muslim community, right? You're going to approach that differently. You want to make sure that your message is resonating with whoever your audience is. The second part is knowing what your message is and what your goal is. So what are you trying to communicate, but also what are you trying to get out of that, right? So going into it with that perspective versus just trying to talk about something, being more clear about what it is that you want to get out of that conversation, and what are you okay with getting out of that conversation. You might not get all the way to your goal, especially in that initial conversation, right? But what is your goal? What's maybe like a secondary goal, and how can we reach those goals through your message? You want to always start by finding common values and points of agreement. This is especially important when you're talking to somebody who comes from a different background, right? So if we start from somewhere where we are not in agreement, or if you start from somewhere where there's a difference, it's going to be a lot harder for us to build that connection, to be able to build that trust. So find those common values, right? It might be that you're a parent and that the person that you're talking to is a parent, and you find that connection point. It might be that, you feel the same way about a certain policy area. Find that connection point. Find that point of agreement and start there, right? Don't just dive into your message, build that rapport. You also want to tell a compelling and cohesive narrative, right? So a lot of times I think when we do have an audience, we end up wanting to just throw the whole book at them. We are trying to get all of our points out really quickly, but sometimes that can hurt us, right? So what is your narrative? What are you trying to actually focus on? Try to make sure that your narrative is compelling, it's cohesive, and simplify, right? As much as possible, simplify. You also want to be proactive, not reactive, and this is something I'll dive in more on the media end. I think I've noticed that our community can sometimes pop out when there's an issue, right, that impacts us. So we are all of a sudden in the media if there's a hate crime that happens, or if there is an issue that specifically impacts our community. You see coverage of our community in Ramadan, right? You see coverage of somebody spray painting the masjid, and absolutely we should be there talking about those issues. But when there isn't something bad happening to our community, we should also be out there talking about our community, talking about the issues that impact us. We need to have that consistent, proactive communication. Avoid jargon and assuming that people know what you're talking about. This is especially true when you're talking to policymakers or journalists. You don't know if they have that same background information, right? They might not be familiar with the terminology you're using or the full background of an issue, right? We pay a lot of attention to what happens in our community, but they may not be. So come to the table thinking, how would I explain this to like my 5-year-old? How would I explain this to a kid or to somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about? And try to start there, right? That doesn't mean talking down to them or, belittling them, but coming from a place of understanding and explanation and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they may not know the issue that you're talking about. Especially when it comes to issues that are, causing a lot of polarization. You want to make sure that you are coming with that foundation of understanding. And kind of coming back to common values and points of agreement, you want to really build trust, right? So build that rapport, build that trust, show why you are somebody that this reporter or this policymaker can depend on as a source of information, as a source of data, as a source of stories, whatever it is. You want to make sure you're building that trust, not just when you're making an ask, but also generally, right? Because then when you are making that ask, you're coming into it with that foundation of trust. You also want to use the right messenger, and so that depends. Are you talking about issues that impact youth in the community? You want to make sure that you have a strong Muslim youth spokesperson who can be out there talking about that issue, right? If you have, an elderly community member talking about issues that impact the youth, that may not be the best messenger. Similarly, if you're talking about issues that impact women in the community, make sure that there's a woman from the community whose voice is out there. So thinking about who the right messenger is for those issues. And then leading with human stories. And I know these are a lot of points, but I do think that, they're all really important, especially this last one. The facts and figures are important, right? But say we're talking about hate crimes. If you're just out here saying X percentage of hate crimes are happening in America or X amount of hate crimes have happened in Los Angeles this year, those numbers are impactful, but they're not impactful the same way a human story will be. So if you start by if there's somebody in the community who has been impacted and they're willing to share their story, or their story and you're able to share that story, this happened to my neighbor, this happened to my friend, or this happened to me, that makes way more of an impact. And then you back it up with the data. And this has also happened to X amount of people, or these are all the masjids in the country that have been, targets of hate crimes. When you lead with that human story, you foster that connection. Any questions there before we move forward? No, we're good. Yes.
Good state. I like the way you deliver your.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so let's dive into engaging the media. I know that there's a lot of distrust in the media, right? And some of that is rightful. We absolutely should be critical of the information we consume, right? Whether that's a WhatsApp message that we receive. I get so many WhatsApp messages from my family, and some of them I'm like, this is made up. This is an AI story, you know? So being thoughtful about what media you're consuming is important. But we also have to recognize that it's a very valuable tool, right? It's a way that we can tell our story, we can shape public opinion, right? So how your neighbors, your community sees you, and also influence policy, because policymakers, they're reading the news to understand the issues that they are voting on, that they are making decisions about. So we have to understand how to utilize that as a tool. Today's landscape is so vast, right? You have your MSNBC, your CNN, your Fox News. Absolutely, you have those traditional broadcasts. There's so many more. There's also radio, there's print. There's popular media formats like podcasts and newsletters. Our community is not really showing up on those media formats right now. We're not really showing up in the news the way other communities are. So how can we really amplify our voices? How can we show up in those spaces is a really important thing to think about. And I know I'm limited on time, so tell me if I need to speed up. So first of all, and I don't know, are you community leaders? Are you, are you just members of the community? But whatever it is, if you are a community leader, this is especially important, is identifying who the local journalists are, right? So who is here, who's covering faith-based communities, who's covering, community involvement at KTLA, at ABC7, at Fox 11, right? So who are the people here in Los Angeles who are covering issues that are local? And then building those relationships. And that means you can go to community events, you can invite them to community events, you can invite them to have a coffee, right? Have an off-the-record coffee. Sit down with them, get to know them, have a conversation, talk to them about what they're covering, what are they interested in covering, right? And then you can go back and you can think, how can I help them with that coverage? How can I insert the Muslim community and our issues into this story or this narrative if it's relevant? Don't just weigh in on hot button issues, right? So stories that are directly about the Muslim community, we absolutely should be out there on. But economic issues, healthcare issues, environmental issues, those all impact us as Americans, as members of this community as well. And we should absolutely be out there making sure our voice is heard. Stay on message, so repeat your key points, know what they are, know the data to back it up. Don't get boxed in by leading questions. Not every journalist, unfortunately, is coming to this with, the best approach or the best intentions, perhaps. So know how to pivot back to your point if you need to. You can always bridge back to your main point, and I'm happy to talk about that more if you're interested. But there are techniques that you can use, right, to make sure that you're staying on your key message, you're not getting distracted, going down rabbit holes that maybe are not what you're hoping to talk about. Always use positive framing, so don't just say what you're against, but say that what you're for, right? And we'll talk a bit more about framing in a second. And then make sure you're prepared, right? So anticipate any tough questions, stay calm, stay focused, make sure that you are really prepared for that conversation, right? Whether you're giving an interview, if you're giving an interview, on camera, let's say you're at a protest, right? And somebody comes up to you with a camera and they wanna hear your perspective while you're there. Make sure that you're prepared before going into a situation like that, because the last thing you wanna do is say something publicly that you maybe would not want to be saying. Any questions before we move forward there? No? Okay. And then the other side of this is talking to government and public officials. And I know we touched on that a little bit, Rebecca touched on that a bit. Always being respectful and strategic, even when you're challenging them, right? So a lot of times these are uncomfortable conversations, but antagonizing never gets us anywhere, right? It's not going to get us closer to our end goal. So keeping that goal in mind, being respectful, being strategic with how we communicate, and making a clear ask. So what is it that you want them to do, right? And so again, this goes back to the simplification. So making sure that we are really being clear about what the goal is and how we want to approach that. And the numbers and narratives, so even with policymakers, it's important that we bring those community voices, those human stories, in addition to the facts, and lead with those human stories. And then finally, following up and staying engaged. Change, it takes a lot of persistence. It takes us showing up again and again and again, even when we hear no, even when it feels so defeating. And I know right now in this political environment, it absolutely does. But change will not come about in a day. It comes about when all of us in this room continue to show up, we continue to make our voices heard, and we don't take no for an answer, right? So what can we do to strengthen our collective voice? We can train community spokespeople, youth, elders, women, leaders. We can all do a better job of being messengers, and that takes practice, that takes training, that takes understanding these issues and how to talk about them. And programs like this are great for that. There's strength in numbers, so building coalitions with allies, not just within the Muslim community, but other organizations in the area, other faith-based organizations, other community service organizations that have similar priorities, and aligning on the messaging when possible so that we have a bigger impact. And then using social media wisely, so amplify messages on there, use it to educate and correct misinformation, because there's a lot of that. Yes?
Just one comment about the trade community or the women or the leaders. What is the practical skill you will make it? I mean, they should participate, involve in the website to make it account, to apply. What kind of?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, training in terms of how to engage, right? So something like what we're doing right now, but on a broader scale, right? So talking to maybe MSAs, right, about how they can go to City Hall and they can make their voices heard, or how they can talk about a certain issue, or what is the issue, right? So what is the message that we're trying to get out, and here are the key points, and here are the facts that you need to know, and here's a practice session for how to engage with a policymaker. Here's a mock session, which I know MPAC does a lot of amazing programming. But really it's just training community members on how to talk about these issues with whichever audiences, whether that's other communities, whether that's other leaders, whether it's with policymakers or with the media. Does that kind of?
How
yeah.
they can involve.
How?
My voice is.
No, you're okay.
Anyway, what I mean is how they can involve as individuals. For example, me, a high educated women.
Yeah.
How can I apply for this? How can?
Oh, okay, for training. Yeah.
Trainer?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, Rebecca, I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
I don't think necessarily that you have to go through any formal training. Like I haven't, you just learn the issues, and then you're one of those community people that can speak on it. And what she mentioned about having the human element within it, you're bringing the human element by showing up as a community member who is a direct. They're the recipient of whatever issue, right? It has impacted you uniquely. So you don't necessarily need any formal training in it. It's just understanding how to get your message across. And so I, welcome anyone that's interested in that. Come to MPAC, and we'll help guide you and we can even attend with you, bring you along for a meeting, as that human element.
And then you can take those skills and teach the people in your network as well. So, I didn't really have much formal training in this. It was learning on the job, right? And so that experience and just practicing and showing up, and you being here in this room right now, this is, you learning and you training yourself. So all of you here are in a way being trained right now, and then you can take this information and spread it to your own network. Okay, should I dive into the issue framing as well?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So we'll talk a bit about framing and how you can frame your message. How we say something is just as important as what we're saying, right? So framing is what shapes how other people interpret our messages. When it's ineffectively framed, people are going to default to the pictures in their head. They're going to default to the narratives that they know, right? So again, we start with shared values, not differences. We want to reframe stereotypes, so not just repeating harmful or negative language to deny it, but replacing that with the truth. And we want to focus on solutions, so not just, this is what the problem is, but also this is what the solution is, this is what change looks like. So for example, we don't want to say we're not terrorists, or the Muslim community is not a terrorist community. We want to say our community stands for peace and justice, right? So we're talking about the values of peace and justice, which Islam absolutely stands for, right? But instead of repeating this stereotype of Muslims are terrorists, which I'm sure everyone in this room has heard some version of, I certainly have, but we lead with these values. Islamophobia is rampant, right? It's rampant, absolutely. We have all experienced it, but instead saying in your messaging, we believe in the promise of a country where everyone can live free from hate, right? So talking about that shared value, regardless of whether they're in our community or not, they're going to resonate with that. Any questions there? No? Okay. So here's a fun values vocabulary, almost like a word bank for some words that can be used when you're talking about your values. So freedom, justice, community, success, choice, right? Prevention, responsibility, fairness. These are all words that can resonate regardless of who your audience is. Going down to more of an issue-based vocabulary. So, environmental issues, childcare, right? That's something that everyone, regardless of which community they're in, if they're a parent, they're concerned about childcare, healthcare. Every single one of us cares about healthcare. Civil rights, that affect so many communities, not just the Muslim community. Counterterrorism, also something our community is impacted by, but so are other communities, right? Especially in this environment that we're in right now. And then even talking about more specific issues. So whether that's diving in even deeper on environmental issues like rainforests or...
All right, I'm going to get started with looking at an important issue. So Miriam mentioned the importance of bringing in the human element, and I want to reinforce that is one of the most effective ways to get your point across. You also have to back it up with data. So I'm going to kind of skip through the next part of the presentation in the interest of time, so that we can kind of get to the tabletop exercise. And this isn't meant to be an exhaustive study of hate crimes in any case. But if you're interested in learning further what's more broadly put out in the presentation deck, it's within your workbooks there, so feel free to take them home and look at them later. Okay, so we've gone through the various layers that's involved in community organizing and how we develop effective messaging. We can use these facts, using hate crimes as an example. It could be any issue. It doesn't necessarily have to be hate crimes. This is just one example that I've used, that I've decided to present to everybody on how we understand it so that we could use the data and the facts behind it in order to supplement our argument when we're engaging with whether it be the media or elected officials. As we're all aware, the reason why I chose this is there's an alarming rise in hate crimes. We're all aware of this, and it really underscores the need for stronger protections. The dramatic increase in reported incidents demonstrate the real-world consequence of escalating Islamophobia, and I will also add that while what we're seeing on the ground is a lot of hate on the ground, what this presentation will show you is that the data is not reflecting it. So how do you then supplement your argument by showing data to support it? Despite the increase of anti-Muslim hate crimes, only a fraction of these incidents are reported, and this stems from a lack of reporting from law enforcement and also a lack of reporting from victims of hate. The lack of mandatory participation, it's not mandated for the FBI, for law enforcement agencies to participate in the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which is also part of the problem, because it doesn't fully then capture the extent of the crisis, which is what we're hearing on the ground. And then it hampers the development. Policymakers aren't then taking it seriously because they're not seeing the data that reflects it. I'm going to skip through just in the interest of time. How do we understand what the difference is between a hate crime and a hate incident? Each of them are handled differently. The key difference lies in whether a crime was committed. A hate crime, which is a criminal act, would be along the lines of assault, threat of violence, or damage to property or injury. And a hate incident indicates offensive actions and behavior which is motivated by prejudices or biases. And it could be through derogatory remarks, sharing offensive material, or other actions. And as I mentioned, hate crimes then go unaddressed because there's a lack of standardized reporting mechanisms, and then a lack of reporting in general from the community. And that could stem from various examples. I'm going to skip around a little bit, so bear with me just a minute. This is, you can get into it a little bit more in your workbooks. I also want to talk a little bit about how our national security policies fuel this Islamophobia, which is really one element of it that isn't touched on fully. We all understand that, there needs to be more reporting for hate crimes, and law enforcement isn't doing enough reporting, but how are the policies that are in place and have been in place for decades, how is that driving hate against our community? So if you take a look at the Director of National Intelligence website, it has a list of the foreign terrorist organizations that it's comprised of mostly Muslim militants. And these policies that the government has in place, this is a government website. It implies that U.S. foreign policy is to confront Islamic militancy, which is true, but it also has been this way for decades, even before 9/11. So as you can see, if you go onto this website, you can see the full website, but most of them are from the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. And then they have a lot of imagery throughout that kind of, it's meant to incite fear and portray that we're at war, or America is at war with Islam. So all this taken together really gives an ugly image of Islam and projects that America is at war with Islam, which then fuels the hate against our community and the discrimination against our community. In 2021, in the previous administration, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Homeland Security identified white supremacist violence as actually the most persistent and lethal domestic terrorist threat. And it was then echoed by former Secretary Mayorkas in a committee hearing. This then influences, as I said, public opinion, and it fuels the anti-Muslim sentiments at home, and it actually does the same abroad as well. And there's a misguided focus that singles out Muslims, and then it ignores other threats such as white nationalism, Hindu nationalist groups, Israeli militants that support extremist ideologies, and others. They're all overlooked to the exclusion of ones that are supposedly Muslim. As we can see here, after in the decision on the Muslim ban. The Muslim ban was really a strategic move, and what we're seeing now is it's all aligned with our national security policies that have been in place, and they really serve their political objectives. As we can see here, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, she highlighted the discriminatory intent behind the policy during her arguments against the ban. And these executive orders and legislation targeting Muslims, they're not new. They've been built on decades-old national security frameworks that the government is now exploiting. And we've seen, many of us have even seen some of these ourselves, watch lists, being detained at airports, selective screening, and we're seeing more and more of that with the executive orders, which then exploit these policies that have been in place for decades. This gets further compounded by issues of other well-funded campaigns like Fear Inc. and others that exploit this climate, and then they spread hate and falsehoods, and it's perpetuated around media and social media as well. And so I'm going to pause there. I know that was just a brief dive into how some of our policies are then fueling hate crimes. Does anyone have any questions on that? Yes, Erica.
I just had a comment, and it could turn into a question.
Uh-huh.
I'm just thinking also about our public schools and the curriculum that they have about Islam in public schools, particularly the book called Persepolis, which I feel also perpetuates like hate towards Muslims and views Muslims, in a negative light. And if you go to, Barnes and Nobles or a lot of bookstores, if you go into the Islam section, it's usually not about Islam. It's usually about terrorism or, books that portray Muslims in a very negative light. So I think that it's, I just wanted to say, do you think it's beyond just media?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like there's,
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's like a pool of people, but what I basically am getting at really is that it's perpetuated. It started by these policies, and then it fed into media, and then it's fed into academia and authors in various books, and so it's kind of pervasive, and so it's fueling the problem. And so then of course we see the repercussions of it here on the ground. Community members that are outside the Muslim faith that have never met a Muslim before, then that's what they think and that's what they see first, and so that's their framing for coming into conversation about it. Any other questions? All right. So yeah.
Couldn't be. Okay. What I do is about that same issue you do.
Mm-hmm.
I talk with my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
I also talk to my distant relatives, but they have a different way of seeing everything.
Mm-hmm.
For example, my relatives in Georgia, they have one news, and it's totally different here.
Yeah.
In Michigan, it's different. Even in the cities in Michigan, it's different. And the same thing in Georgia, or Tennessee, or Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way. They have different way of looking at everything.
Yeah.
Nobody sees it the same.
That's absolutely true. So I guess it's where they're getting their information from.
But we exchange information. We come from and how we keep talking to each other. We stay in common terms with what we can discuss without,
Yeah.
fighting.
Yeah, absolutely true. It's important to keep talking to people so that they see us for who we are and not what others say we are. All right, so how do we build a better response? And I think that's really up to the federal government, but it's really driven by our voices speaking out on the issue. And also the other important part of this that I want to emphasize is the need for us to report these issues. Sure, they may not immediately impact us. It might, obviously if you're in an emergency situation, you want to call 911. But it's important to gather that data so that it's also, the policymakers then can't ignore us. And so if you report hate crimes, and I'll give you the various ways to do that, whether it be a hate crime or hate incident, it's then documented and they're not able to look past it or argue beyond it. And you're also supported by the data. So you may bring the human element into your story, but it's also supported by the data. I already went into this, so I'm just gonna skip ahead in the interest of time. And in your workbooks, you can also see this timeline of change. It's just an example of some various laws that were passed in response to certain important issues that happened, whether that be hate crimes after COVID or hate crimes driven by the 2016 election. And it's just a timeline of different efforts and what prompted the change and how raising our voices, not just us, but other marginalized communities, helped impact that change. All right. And I mentioned earlier, how can you report hate? So like I said, there's a difference between a hate crime and a hate incident. Obviously, if you're in an emergency situation, you're going to want to call 911, and then a police report would be taken on it, and then they would also report it. But there's another avenue as well, which is an important one to talk about. LA versus Hate, they're the ones who funded this presentation, and they have a reporting hotline that was established a few years back, 211. So if you dial 211 after the hate crime or hate incident has happened, in order to get the data, they compile all this data into an annual report. And so if you dial 211, not only do they have resources that they can help you with, but then also the data is compiled, and we're able to then more effectively advocate for our position, because through the combined effort of you doing the community engagement, the civic engagement, and bringing along the human story, you can back it up with the data, which is through these reports where all this data is compiled. And that way it's kind of reinforced. And so that's about it. Yes, Jacob.
Can we go back to the last slide for
Yeah.
one more? I just want to also highlight the online report.
Yeah.
Because the city just added hate crimes and hate incidents to the online report too, so you don't have to wait for someone to answer the phone. So it's a super important tool. I can
Yes.
say that again if you want.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just to highlight that, because a lot of times if you call the non-emergency number, you have to wait for hours and hours for them to answer you. You can for hate incidents and hate crimes, if it's not an emergent kind of sudden issue like emergency, you can go to the LAPD online, file a report, and you can now file reports for hate crimes and hate incidents online. And that data is super important for documenting how much and how prevalent those incidents are for our community.
Yeah.
Are there similar website for the county or different counties, different cities? Because this is only LA, I think.
So this, I know for sure LAPD just added that. It's going to be case by case.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
Are you sure they don't have an emergency for that?
No,
There's still 911 if there's an emergency. But if it's, for example, if there is, Islamophobic graffiti you want to report as a hate incident, that's not an emergency. And so, but we still should want to have the data to record that was an incident that happened.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
So
go ahead.
211, is this only for LA area or California?
211 is LA County.
LA County.
Yeah. So I would say that this is not, like Jacob said, it's not prevalent throughout the U.S. So I would say LA is probably one of the only ones that has that reporting hate line. But I would say in general, if you have family members or friends in other areas, I would still urge them to use the avenues that they have to report hate, so that it can then increase the awareness around the issue. Because we know we're seeing a lot more on the ground than what is actually showing up in these reports.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, I just want to say one case about if you are in the bus station or in the street and someone come to you and harass you, say something bad for you like that, and then what should you do? Is this one of
This
the
is one of
agents?
those. This is one of those avenues.
What is the practical steps to say it? I mean, to call them and the person who made that just gone and you don't know who is.
Right, you don't know who it is, but it's still documented. You could say where you were located, what you said or what was said, and given those details, it's enough to report it. You don't necessarily have to know who the other person is.
Do you think Muslims still, we are now, the population here in United States is less than 5 million, which is less than 2% of the total population, but we still have that kind, we are in the, in Arabic, عنق الزجاجة, the bottle neck. So we just in that place, which should we say something to qualify or to say justice or to say something to improve ourselves and to say we are not terrorists, we are not Islamic phobia, we don't to do that, but we want to just move it.
Right.
We are a human like the others.
Yes.
They just move and live the normal life.
Right.
But we just make like the camel when he eats something, he just make it around,
Yeah.
and this is not fair. Really.
Yeah. And so it goes back to the importance of having to, portray our Islamic values and get our narrative across and speak up. So a lot of us within our community, we don't speak up, but we need to speak up. We need to speak up with respect and show that we want to promote peace and justice and contribute to society.
Maybe some people of us can make that as a leader and they can speak up, but not all of us. We need to live. We need to be a normal, regular life, to have a regular life like others.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
the crossing over neighborhoods, not just your neighborhood, okay? And there's certain people in each neighborhood that cause trouble some way, okay? But even if a person was causing trouble, the first thing that I notice when I get in this situation is respect that person. I know probably some people in here say, why would I just respect him? I'm respecting him as a human person. I speak to him like that, and I don't go at him, push toward him. I just talk with him, keep everything short if I say something. But I'm not going to disrespect him because that agitates people.
Right.
If you do that.
Exactly. It's how you conduct yourself. Go ahead, sister. I'm sorry.
Good morning, everyone. It happened to me incident the second day for President Trump, his takeoff. And I was working for my neighborhood. The guy chasing me because I was talking with my family by English Arabic language, and then he was chasing me, and then he's like trying to hit me, and it's like
Wow.
really.
I'm so sorry.
I seen the person get on the train. He went up to the lady and like that. I reported it.
Good.
Immediately. I emergency. And tell me what the response was on the train. I had to stick around the perimeter because I saw the guy walking around. I had to stay way away from him where he couldn't recognize me. And I kept calling again. Over and over and over. They said, oh, they're looking in, they're going in, they'll be there in a little while. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, hours, still nothing happens. This is an act of terrorism. He hit the lady like this, knuckles. I seen him when he was doing it on the train.
Wow.
and nothing happened.
Yes, and that's
Nothing happened there.
that's really bad. And same with the sister. And I'm sorry, go ahead. You had more to say.
And I really is like scared. I don't know what to do, and just I ask help from the people around me, and then he ran. Even he's not, he doesn't look American. American is like a Korean or East Asian. Yeah, but I really have a strong community. I live in Little Tokyo. I notify them, and really they make sure they're going to have security in the area, and really they make urgent like a meeting with the community, and we have like posted. They give us like what we can do, because not except that it's like very experience to me, happened to me. I never walk like free in the community, and we have like friends. It's like normal, even the people they are really friendly. But that guy, I don't know, maybe has something of bad morning, because it was like after I drove my kids to school and I come home to do some stuff, and he's like, don't go back here. This is not your country. You don't need to be here. I didn't. This is shock. I was like.
Did you say that you reported it?
I didn't report to the police because it's like this is my first experience.
Yeah.
Nothing happened to me all my life here. But I talked to the community, and really they take care of that, and they make sure they're going to have security in the area. They're going to have like more knowledge and for the community to support each other. Yeah.
I would still. That's really unfortunate. I'm so sorry that you went through that. Unfortunately, that's so much of what is happening. But I would still urge you, and I'm glad that they've resolved it and you feel safer in your area. But I would still urge you, even now, even though it's been a couple of months, to call 211, to at least tell them about it so that it gets documented. So,
Yeah. I think this is a very important case because not very many people trust the authorities. They definitely don't trust the police. So it's important that the Islamic Center and MPAC be that liaison between the community and the authorities. So we can take that information and then we go to the authorities and say that number one, it has to be documented as a hate crime. Number two, provide whatever services you need, whether it's security services or mental health. Definitely this was a traumatic experience, but the county and the city should provide those kinds of services for you. So we should at least document it in our own community. And I think more and more people should tell, if you're not going to report it to the police or to the county, then at least report it to your mosque and MPAC. And then we can be that interface for you.
Thank you so much. And I'm also, I walk to the place. I want to go to 7-Eleven. He's following me there. But that stuff is a lot of people there. He said nothing, and he said nothing to me. Then he walked around, walked out.
Well, that's another point, is that person should be brought to justice. I mean, that person, we should get the police to apprehend him, and the city attorney and the county district attorney to prosecute him, and the community, will be full support of bringing that person to justice. And then, if there are ways to intervene later to educate that person, to educate the larger community about Muslims here, that we should all step up if we see something like that happen, not ignore it. We can do that as well.
I'm thinking incidents.
So just to follow up quickly on this one, I think there is a statute of limitations, so you don't want to wait too long. I think there's 1 year, correct? So I would also, I agree with Rebecca and Salam, report it as soon as possible and before the statute of limitations, and maybe hopefully they will get, that person.
The point is, she doesn't have to do it herself. We can go on her.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
People are in that situation.
so sister, if I could talk to you afterwards, I'd like to get your information so that we can help you with this.
Thank you.
I also had a follow-up question for that. So if, for example, someone in our community doesn't feel comfortable reporting a hate crime, is there a way to do it anonymously? I know you can do it through you guys, for example,
Yes.
for us.
Yes.
But and the other thing I wanted to bring up, if your children in school are being called terrorists or being harassed in any way for being Muslim, that's something that can be reported as well. It's not just for adults. And I know that that happens to our kids a lot. So.
It happened to my kid.
Happened to mine as well.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, great. So, sister, I'd like to talk to you a little bit afterwards, if possible, so we could help you out. I'm really sorry that happened to you. Hopefully, we can find justice for you. Mm-hmm. All right. So, we're actually running short on time, so I don't know necessarily how much time we have to break into groups and all, but we can go through some of these elements, and maybe we can take answers from the audience, and I can do some question prompts here. Let me go ahead and.
Do you want to have this microphone?
I don't know if I can write and do the microphone at the same time. Sorry, I'm I need to. Anyways, let me just move it over here. Maybe you could write for me, Sister Erica.
Okay.
Can you do that? All right, we'll do that. All right, so you can go ahead and shout out the answers to me. We'll kind of adjust given in the interest of time. So let's say that we're going to plan a meeting with our elected officials, which any one of us can do, and you can always come to MPAC, and we can help you through this if you'd like, and even attend with you if you'd like. And we'll use an issue, hate crimes, as an issue, since we all fairly understand the issue and we know that it's a prevalent issue in our community. So what would be the first step if you were going to go to your member of Congress or your city councilman, what do you think your first step would be? And go ahead and shout it out.
Maybe introduce yourself and maybe say something about them, so you will cut the wall between you and the others. So,
I mean, even before that, before you even get there, when you're first thinking about it and you're like, okay, this is the issue I want to talk about, this is the elected official I want to talk to, what should be the first thing that you guys...
prepare yourself and make some comment. If they say like this, you will answer like this. So
Mhm.
you give yourself a huge things of they're responsible. Maybe they agree with you, they disagree. So you will be prepared.
So, and your question earlier on how can you prepare yourself or sign up to do this, you did it, you're here, so great job. Anyone else want to add to that?
You let the person who you went to know who you talking to. Did you call? What did you do?
Mm-hmm.
First.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
how what you
That's
want.
one of the important things.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say before you even get there is you should find out what issues they find that your elected official, what positions they have on certain issues, what issues are important to them. Is safety of the community something that they have stood up for before, or message that is important for them as an elected official to advocate for? That would be the first thing. And then, just like the sister described after that, you would plan your messaging. And similar to how Miriam talked about how you frame a message. If you're going with a group, I would ensure everyone prepares in advance so that each person is given a set of talking points so that you don't duplicate what others are saying. You're going in with a strategic plan. That's actually really seen well by when you're engaging elected officials or even media. If you go in with a plan, I think we've been told that before as well, that we really came in with a clear strategic plan on how to engage these officials. So that would be the way to plan it in ahead is come in with a group, each one have their own set. And as Miriam mentioned earlier, the importance of bringing a human element. So you'll have your data to back you up, understand the issue that you're advocating for with some of the data points, but come in with a human story. For example, bring along the sister who was having an issue with the man attacking her. That would be a perfect example of a human element. This happened to this person in your district. You have to do something about it. So that would be a perfect example of that. Any other thoughts on that or questions? No? All right. Let's talk a little bit about how we build a coalition then. So as we know right now, there are many communities in Los Angeles that are being targeted by these executive orders, not just Muslims, right? We find it uniquely because we've been here before and we've seen a lot of these things before. But they're now using these, they're now deporting like the Latino community and using these same policies to target them. So that's one example of a coalition partner that you could identify, is find a coalition partner, even one that has a little bit of influence that represents that community, and then you can work together to do the same practice that we did before with elected officials. You would plan your messaging and decide who's going to say what in what order, and then go in together. And the more people you can get to give a unified voice on this, the better. So that's why bringing along coalition partners is important, as I mentioned before with the example I gave with the John Buggs Award. Does anyone have any more thoughts on that? No. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up, and I know that the audience had a lot of questions. We do have a couple more minutes if you'd like to ask a few more questions or discuss more related issues in regards to it. Yes.
There's organizations east here that's in constant court about housing, okay, but other cases also. So maybe we can communicate with the other
Councilman?
No, East County, in so many counties,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, councilmen, they represent district, okay? So there's different districts.
Mm-hmm.
They have similar problems, but in some districts, like the one close to Alhambra, they're in constant court for over 15 years on the same issue,
Mm-hmm.
the same issues. So they have a lot of experience. So what we're doing over here may not be used to that,
Mm-hmm.
those particular type of cases.
Right.
They win cases and they have prolonged cases for years. That's why it takes so long. They win cases while this is all going on. You know what I mean? So they have a lot of experience. And I mean, I think we should communicate with an organization that has more experience than what we at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom level.
Mm-hmm.
These are active ones. They have really good attorneys. You know, that get something accomplished. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think we can learn from those.
That would be a great example of how to identify potential coalition partners and how to also learn from other examples like we went through in the presentation, how to learn from other examples to set our strategy and our messaging.
El Sereno, it's known as the place that the county, the whole city, is the hardest part in the city to get anything done. I mean, they want to take the homes, but it's extremely difficult. They go over there, and there are people like me or some other people who will speak up for the seniors there because they want to take their houses. Because those houses come from Vietnam, Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it goes back to that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then no one, the seniors, it's harder for them to even speak. You know, when they're old, you know, they're aged, and they have a platform where they only give them 1 minute. You know how you ask a person that's dying, you know, sick, you give them 1 minute.
Yeah.
that's way too short.
It's hard enough for many
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah. So I had to speak up.
Yeah.
I had to speak up, and I knew the consequences. But when I spoke up, I didn't get anybody. Of course, everybody got upset. You know, they were upset. But I know how to communicate politically. In other words, I respect them all. First thing. Then I call them, and then I ask questions like I'm doing now, talking. And then when they say something about, oh, you can get this, oh, we're gonna give you, you get parking, you have to pay for it. And I said, what? Does it make sense to agree to a situation and you have to pay for it when you already get it for free? Why would you ask for that? And how is that gonna benefit this neighborhood when we already have houses already? That's not benefiting us. So I said, that's what I said to them. Of course, they asked me to leave. But I already know how it works. So I kind of rebuttal for that too. And it works. With a policeman, with a gun. You just make one statement. And then you get quiet. So he goes to me, I said, do you really want to go to a court situation? You want to touch me? If you touch me, then we go into court. I'm not going to do anything to you. But if you touch me, you go into court. And it's easy to get you fired. Because you just aggressed on me for nothing. He backed off. And the leader, oh, no, I'm not trying to, the policeman backed off. She's a woman policeman. She backed off. I'm not trying to touch you.
Yeah.
Well, how do we get out? I'm not going to walk out.
Well, I think you just described you went in there with a plan. And so I think we all can do that with all the issues that are facing us. And, I want to offer MPAC support in any of this. I know this is all new to many of you, but we really need to speak in a unified voice so that we can be taken seriously. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. Oh, you have one more question?
Yeah,
Yes.
just one comment about, to be clear. Now, if someone has arrested or something bad in the street or whatever, he can call your council or hear the South California Mosque. Is that what you said now?
Yes, I would
Because
say.
we don't want to involve by our name in 911 or 291. If
You can
they
make an
ask you about your name and whatever, and we don't want to enter in this thing. Is that what you say?
That's what I'm saying, yes. I know MPAC is a reporting agency to the LA County Human Relations Commission, and we can help make that report for you, and it can be anonymous, yes.
Yeah, you mean now the number which we can find it in the website, just call it and say, okay, what happened to us, the story, and that's it. Okay, that's good. And the other thing, how can you, because this is the goal of the Council Muslim, how the practical things to improve the leader of, for example, a woman, to if she wants to involve and to be a leader, and then of course we will encourage and improve our speaking in this society, because we need to improve our thinking, our what we believe in. How the practical step in the council should this women take?
Well, I would say participating in various programs that we put on throughout the year. We put on various programs. Not all of them are workshops, but it's where you can learn these various tools where you could then feel confident enough to speak out. You could volunteer with us, and that can start small and then get bigger. Like, for example, I started out as a volunteer at MPAC, and I'm always learning. I'm still learning, but I would say I've gotten much more confident now doing these types of things and speaking out than I did in the very beginning.
And is there any internship which we can apply for?
There are internships are usually geared towards college students, but for if you're not a college student, you can always come volunteer at some of our events, and then eventually, as we build out our programming on that, we could consider ways to kind of make our volunteer program a little more robust, so that people have the opportunity to learn these tools.
Okay, maybe the last things which I recommend the Muslim Council to be in the future, to maybe rise the people, especially the Muslim people who want to take a job, because here we struggle. I can tell you that. As a doctor, and I have a PhD, 2 masters, I cannot catch a job until now. It is like 2 years, and I don't know what is the problem. And maybe the background is only in Japan, Korea, Holland, UK, but even that. So is there any plan in the future this council can help the people to involve? For example, I will give you the Singapore. What their policy is to make a code for every companies or even the residents, the building. They have to be a mix with different population, for example, India, Muslim, Malaysia, whatever. So that it gives them the empower things to make a good community. What about this in the future? Do you have any idea maybe?
Yeah, well, while MPAC doesn't really have job services as part of our role, we really work on the policies. We have in the past put out, like for example, right after October 7th, when employees started getting discriminated against for speaking out, we submitted to different companies a pledge to sign on you know, how to not discriminate against the Muslim workforce, and how to, you know, engage them in a productive manner and have them be valued staff members. So things like that, that's really our lane. I'm not sure if the Mashhad has something like that, but you know, if you're being discriminated against, I don't know if that is at the if you find that you're discriminated against, whether, you know, when in your job hunt, I think that could be something where we can use that as an example of a human element, where we bring it to our policymakers and use it as an example. Our role at MPAC is really to help not only change the perception of Muslims by those around us, but also to work to change the policies. So we don't necessarily have job services, but I think that it can be one of the human elements that we bring to the table. But do come to us if you find you are having trouble and being discriminated against in the job hunt. I think that's an important element to include.
Can I just make a quick announcement? There's a white Tesla that's parked next to the Islamic Center that's about to be towed. So if someone has a white Tesla and they parked by the marketplace right here, just let you know it's about to be towed.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining. It's really up to all of us now to take what we learned forward into our lives. Please utilize us as a resource, MPAC as a resource. And, you know, if you want more information, or once you go through the booklet, if you have questions about what you learned, we're always happy to help guide you through that. And a big thank you to the Islamic Center of Southern California for hosting us today. And then also a reminder about the resources at 211, and the emphasis again on reporting is important through 211 or through us, that we can help guide you through that. So thank you all for attending today.